Welcome back to the channel. Spring fishing is finally here in the Northeast, but unfortunately with that comes spring rains, making our waters super muddy compared to what we fish throughout the year. So today we're going to talk about 4 baits that if you rig these up and go fishing with them, no matter how muddy the water gets, you will still be able to catch bass on these baits here. It'll make your fishing a lot easier in muddy water conditions. So stay tuned and let's get right into it. So before we talk about these 4 baits and why they work in muddy water, let's talk about why you need to change your bait selection in muddy water, and even how I think fishing is a little bit easier in the springtime when the water is muddy. So there's 2 things that muddy water is going to do in the springtime for you. The first is whenever the water gets muddy, most often the fish are going to have to go shallow because they're going to want to be near some type of cover. So they will hang very tight to any laydowns you can see on the bank or any type of rock pile or anything like that. It'll make them very predictable compared to when they have clear water. They can roam around, they'll go offshore, stuff like that. But if the water is very dirty, they will get very shallow, even in cold water, just because it's the only piece of cover. They want to be next to the bank. They just want to hang tight and wait for that spring rain water to clear. Once the water gets clear again, then they'll start moving. The other thing that muddy water does is in the springtime when you have a really warm sunny day, you'll have those abnormal 70-degree days up here in the Northeast. You get the sun beating down on the bank. If you have clear water, it might warm up a couple degrees, but not very much. If you have muddy water, on smaller bodies of water, especially ponds, small lakes, or even creek arms leading into a bigger body of water, those places will heat up so fast. That muddy water retains the heat, plus the pieces of wood and stuff that they're hanging on will also retain the heat, so that warms up very fast. It gets very warm for them to be in. It's like wearing a black coat versus a white coat in the sun. It's literally like them wearing a black sweatshirt up there. It gets warm fast, and then after that temp goes away and maybe you have a cold day the next day, that water still stays warmer than the rest of the lake because clear water will lose its heat faster while muddy water also contains the heat longer. So that muddy water can make them much more predictable. You know, if there's 3 laydowns on a bank and it's got muddy water with sun beating down on it, those 3 laydowns are going to be the only places those fish will be on that entire bank. So it makes you very easy to pick your targets, and it'll make you very easy to pick your baits here, which we're going to talk about right now, starting with number 1. I will always throw a crankbait in muddy water. There's going to be 2 things you're going to see with the next few baits we talk about here. You either need to appeal to their sound and vibration, so this has a rattle in it. This is also a square bill crankbait as opposed to a flat-sided crankbait. It has a wider wobble, so it puts off more vibration. Or, as you'll also notice with this crankbait, it is very bright in color. So the fish can't see as far. You either need to go very bright in color so they can see it from a distance, minimal distance at that, or you need to pick something with a lot of vibration and sound for them to be able to find it. This square bill crankbait will do that job perfectly, and it will get through all that laydown cover up there that those fish are going to hang in this time of year anyway. Typically in the springtime, I'm throwing flat-sided balsa wood crankbaits, but this is going to be the time when that water gets really dirty. I don't care how cold the water is, I'm going to go to the square bill and a bright color and a rattling bait, and I'm going to throw that vibration to make sure those fish can find it. You're not going to get a lot of bites in muddy water. No matter how perfect you pick your baits, it's still going to be hard to get bites. But if you can do something to get a couple more bites than somebody throwing a flat-sided crankbait or throwing something more finesse or natural, that's going to be the key in you doing well in a tournament or just a day out fishing, throwing something that those fish can find. So a couple recommendations that I would have for square bill crankbaits to use. The standby is the Strike King KVD 1.5. I've thrown this thing for years and years. It works. It catches a lot of fish. They're readily accessible everywhere. You'll notice one color choice that I like is that black back chartreuse. What you want is a lot of contrast in your color choice, whether it's bright yellow and dark black, or like this one right here. This is a 6 Sense Crush 50X. This one has a rattle to it compared to the Strike King. That's why I like this one just a little bit more. This black and red. It's a very bright red orange color, and it has the black in there to throw a little bit of contrast. A bright color would work. You could throw literally a flame red crankbait with no other colors on it, but that little bit of contrast helps in that muddy water as well. That's why black and blue works so well. Black and red, those type of colors are what's going to really catch you a lot of fish this time of year. So those are the two color choices I'm going to go to, chartreuse blackback or a black and red square bill. That is my first choice for fishing these muddy water laydowns where these fish will be. My second choice for fishing these muddy water laydowns is going to be another search bait, but this one will work in even colder water than the square bill crankbait if you pick the correct one, and that is going to be the spinnerbait. So not just any spinnerbait is going to be what I put on this time of year when you have that muddy water. I'm going to either a double Colorado or a single Colorado spinnerbait. If you do a single Colorado, that would be in the coldest water you fish, low 40s, mid 40s. Anything above 45 degrees, I'm pretty much going to go to the double Colorado. 48 and above even, that's like the range you want to be at to go to the double Colorado. And that is also when I'll go to that red kicker blade. Very rarely do people fish that, but in the springtime it's very popular. And like I said, it's because of the contrast. You have your regular gold flashing blade and your white and chartreuse skirt that you always throw, but you have this random orange blade here that throws that color out as it's spinning to really draw the fish in and find this bait. So you have white and chartreuse is my go-to color. You'll have the white and chartreuse skirt. You have this orange blade that throws color all here, easy for them to find this big presentation, and then on top of that you have two Colorado blades that put out a ton of vibration for these fish to be able to find it. I will roll cast this thing right next to the laydowns as tight as I can get it. I'll slow roll it down the edge of the laydown. If it runs into a tree, I'll just keep reeling it until it pops over that limb. I'll kill the retrieve. It'll fall back down a little bit and start a slow retrieve again. That quick pause even can be very key. If that fish is hanging on that one limb that's hanging on the tree and you hit that limb and go over it and give it a quick pause, they can see that color. It gives them just a second to be able to find that bait if they're hanging out right there and you put it in front of their face. And that is the key to getting a bunch of bites in the springtime on these dirty water laydowns. The other thing I'm going to do to my spinnerbait this time of year is I'm always going to fish a trailer. It adds extra bulk and color, but it also adds a bigger target. So they could target this little orange blade because that's the brightest thing on here, but if you put a bigger trailer on here, they'll notice that this meal is much bigger down here than it is up here, and oftentimes they'll target this hook a lot better and be able to get the bait in their mouth and get a good hookup. So I'll take like a Reaction Innovation Skinny Dipper or a Kitech or any your favorite type of swim bait. I'll trim it down so the tail just hangs past the skirt, and I will put that on there just to give a better target for the fish to be able to bite this and make sure you get better hookups. Now my third bait choice is also going to be a search bait, and this is going to allow me to fish wood, but also if you have some grass that gets some muddy water on it, that is going to be a chatterbait. A couple different things I'm going to do here with my chatterbait. As we talked about, these have a ton of vibration to them. They're going to be able to find it in that grass. They're going to be able to find it in those laydowns. This blade vibrating on the front of the head is really going to put off that vibration for them to find it. And then again, I'm going to go with my color choice. I'm going to pick a couple different colors on this one. Again, the white and chartreuse always works. You can see how bright that thing is. It just allows them to find it really easily. I'd put a white trailer on here like a Yamamoto Zaco, and I'd go to town chucking this thing around, and they'd be able to find that. But there's a couple other colors that people don't throw as much. Also, the Z-Man Firecraw jackhammers, those would work too. I don't even have any of those, but they would work well in muddy water. The one that I like a little bit better than the Firecraw is going to be the Heights Hot Craw. Not many people talk about that one, but again, contrast. You got the dark green pumpkin back, the red belly, and then if you get something like a Alabama Craw trailer or a green pumpkin orange even, you can get that bright orange color in there by adding a trailer that's very orange to this, and it's just something a little bit different than everyone throwing that Firecraw jackhammer, and sometimes that can get you more bites. And then the other one that I'll throw is just the old black and blue. That one always works in muddy water. Contrast again. And then the trailer that I'd like to pick for this, sometimes you can go black and blue, but if you really want it to stand out, the sapphire blue trailers that are just pure blue, if you put that on there, that'll really stand out in muddy water. It gets a lot of vibration, and it has that contrast you need to be able to get some fish to bite that bait. And my final bait for muddy water, this one is not going to be a search bait for once. This is going to be for if you find an area you know those fish are, or like I said, you see 3 laydowns on a bank, you know that only those laydowns are going to have fish on it. That's when I'd go to a jig. The other ones, I'm searching for fish. A lot of times in muddy water, like I said, you're fishing for 5 or 6 bites, but they'll be good ones. So I want to cover as much water as I can to make sure I get the most amount of bites possible. But if you dial in an area where you know there are some fish, the jig can really help you get more bites. Like I said, if you can get that in front of their face with the spinnerbait, this is even more effective at that. If you know the laydowns there and you work it really slowly through the laydowns and you pick the right color jig, oftentimes I'll go a little bit bigger on my jig. This is a mini flip and I have caught them in dirty water on this, but sometimes I'll go to a little bit bigger jig. I'll go to a pure blue trailer, and the black and blue, like I talked about, sapphire blue trailer, flipping blue, sometimes they call it, from the Berkley Powerbait Meaty Chunks. That's going to be the setup that I like to go to then, and I will drag it as slow as I can through those laydowns and brush piles, because those fish could be on any limb that's under the water there, and unless you hit them in the face sometimes, they can't find your bait. So if you fish it really slow and drag it over every limb and let it fall back down and over and fall back down, if you pull it in front of one and it gets its attention, it will know where this bait's at and go get it, and you'll land a lot more fish that way. I like to fish slow once I know where the fish are at, especially in muddy water, because you need to get the bait in front of their face to get more bites. So that's when I'll go to the jig. I gotta have one slow moving bait, but for the most part, I'm in search mode with those other 3. I'm gonna try and find as many active fish as I can that are willing to feed and willing to bite those baits. So I hope you enjoyed today's video talking about my 4 favorite baits for muddy water, and I hope they help you catch more fish. If you want to see what kind of crankbaits you'd like to have this spring, go ahead and check this video out right here. And we have some spring rains in the forecast, so we might be getting some muddy water soon. The fish are starting to move shallow here in the Northeast, so if there's anything you want to see specific around one of these 4 baits, a more in-depth video on it, leave it in the comments below and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any more of my fishing videos coming up.